The glass door clicked shut behind me. Final. Permanent. I stood in the marble lobby of Quinlan Industries, holding a white envelope as if it were evidence of murder. My murder. 18 years reduced to severance terms and a non-compete clause that might as well have been a death sentence. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled beneath me, indifferent to the knife Victor Quinlan had just planted in my back. My phone buzzed. A text from him, no hard feelings. Business is business. I deleted it. Business was never just business. Not when you built an empire with your bare hands only to watch someone else wear the crown. My reflection stared back at me from the polished floor, hollow-eyed, stunned. But beneath the shock, something else stirred. Something cold and calculated. They thought I'd disappear quietly. They thought wrong. I had prepared for this moment years ago, buried deep in contracts they'd signed without reading. An exit strategy. My insurance policy. And now, watching Victor celebrate on the top floor with champagne probably older than my career, I knew exactly what came next. Revenge doesn't announce itself. It simply executes. 24 hours earlier, everything was different. I walked into Victor's corner office expecting congratulations. The quarterly reports showed $1.3 billion in revenue from the Helix platform, my creation, my vision. My sleepless nights turned into profit margins that made shareholders weep with joy. Victor stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back like some corporate philosopher. "Sit down, Cade," he said without turning around. Something in his voice made my stomach drop. I sat. He turned slowly, his silver hair catching the afternoon light. "The board's been discussing organizational efficiency." Efficiency. That word never meant anything good. "We're restructuring," he continued. "Your role has become redundant." The word hit me like a fist. Redundant. I built the platform that saved this company from bankruptcy 3 years ago. I turned a desperate gamble into a billion-dollar asset. And now I was redundant. "Victor, I don't understand, it's already decided." He slid the termination letter across his desk. "Effective immediately. Your access has been revoked." My hand shook as I picked up the envelope. 18 years. Gone. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I stood up, looked Victor in his calculating eyes, and walked out. In the elevator, reality crashed over me in waves. My badge won't work tomorrow. My team would get an email saying I'd pursued other opportunities. My project would continue without my name attached. The elevator descended 43 floors. Each level felt like another piece of my identity being stripped away. When the doors opened to the lobby, Maritza from HR was waiting. She handed me a box with my desk items, a photo of my daughter, a coffee mug that said, "Code is poetry," and a plaque from when Helix won Innovation of the Year. They'd already cleaned out my office. Already erased me like I never existed. "I'm sorry, Cade," Maritza whispered. But she wasn't sorry enough to stop it. No one was. I carried that box through the lobby, past colleagues who suddenly found their phones fascinating, past the security desk where Ramon looked away because he'd been told to, and out into the September air that tasted like betrayal. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the building I'd entered as a hungry 26-year-old with student loans and ambition burning in my chest. The Quinlan Industries tower stretched into the sky like a monument to everything I'd lost. My phone exploded with messages. "Dex, my former second-in-command, what happened?" "Liana from legal, this can't be real." "Ronan from marketing, call me." I turned the phone off. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want their shock. I wanted answers. No, I wanted justice. At a red light 6 blocks away, I opened my laptop. The file I'd created 5 years ago sat buried in encrypted folders with innocuous names. exit_strategy_final.pdf. I'd built it after watching Victor fire the previous CTO over a personality conflict that was really about credit and control. I'd learned then that loyalty meant nothing in boardrooms built on glass and greed. The light turned green. I drove to a coffee shop in a neighborhood where no one from Quinlan ever ventured. I ordered black coffee and opened the file that would end Victor's empire. The document was 73 pages of legal architecture. Every clause I negotiated into my original contract. Every protection I'd embedded in the Helix development agreements. Every ownership stake I'd secured before Victor realized what he was signing. In 2019, when Helix was just a concept sketched on napkins and midnight whiteboards, Victor was desperate. The company was hemorrhaging money. Investors were circling like vultures. He needed a miracle, and I'd offered him one, but not for free. "What do you want?" he'd asked during that 2 a.m. meeting in his office. "Protection," I'd said. "Ownership. A stake that can't be erased." He'd laughed. "You think we'll fail?" "I think people forget who built what they own." He'd signed everything I put in front of him because back then, he needed me more than pride. Now, reading those clauses again, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: power. Section 7.3, in the event of termination without cause, all intellectual property rights revert to the original architect. Section 11.2, the creator maintains perpetual licensing authority for derivative works. Section 15.8, ownership dissolution requires creator approval. I called Thaddeus Brandt. He'd been my attorney since before Quinlan, back when I was freelancing and couldn't afford his hourly rate. He'd taken me on anyway because he saw something in my work that reminded him of his own hungry years. "Cade," Thaddeus answered on the second ring. "I heard." "How?" "Legal networks move faster than lightning. Victor's already circulating memos about leadership transitions." "What do you need?" "I need to burn it all down." Silence stretched between us. Then Thaddeus laughed, low and dangerous. "Tell me you kept the original contracts." "Every single page." "Then we have work to do." We met at his office in a renovated warehouse that smelled like old books and expensive bourbon. Thaddeus spread my contracts across a conference table, reading with the focus of a surgeon examining X-rays. "This is brilliant," he said after 30 minutes. "They can't operate Helix without your approval. Every update, every licensing deal, every integration, you own the foundation. Can they fight it?" "They can try. But you built walls within walls here. Even if they challenge, litigation would take years. And during that time, Helix becomes worthless." I leaned back, letting the implications wash over me. Victor hadn't just fired me. He'd handed me the detonator to his empire. Thaddeus drafted the notice that night. It arrived at Quinlan Industries at 9 a.m. the next morning, certified, legally binding, and devastating. Pursuant to contract clauses 7.3, 11.2, and 15.8, all rights to Helix platform intellectual property are hereby revoked. Effective immediately, Quinlan Industries is prohibited from operating, licensing, or modifying the platform without express written consent from the original architect. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action and financial penalties not less than 3 times the current annual revenue. I imagined Victor reading it. The coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. The words blurred as rage and panic competed for space in his chest. By noon, my phone, which I'd turned back on, rang 17 times. Victor. His assistant. The company's chief counsel. The board chairman. I answered none of them. Instead, I sent a single email to Penelope Voss, the investigative journalist who'd been trying to interview me for 2 years about corporate innovation. "Ready to talk," I wrote. "Meet me tomorrow. Bring questions about how billion-dollar platforms get built, and who really owns them." She responded in 4 minutes, "Where and when?" The meeting with Penelope happened in a hotel restaurant downtown. She arrived with a recorder, a notebook, and the sharp eyes of someone who'd made a career exposing corporate fraud. "You're really doing this," she said, ordering coffee. "Victor Quinlan isn't someone you cross lightly." "Victor Quinlan crossed me first," I told her everything. The 18 years of loyalty. The late nights building Helix while Victor took credit in boardrooms I wasn't invited to. The promises of partnership that evaporated the moment my work became too valuable to share. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, and twice said, "Holy hell. What's your endgame?" Penelope asked. "Revenge? Justice? There's a difference. Tell me." "Revenge is emotional. Justice is structural. I don't want to hurt Victor, I want to expose what he really is. A CEO who built an empire on stolen genius and discarded loyalty. Let the market decide what that's worth." She smiled. "When can I publish?" "Give me 72 hours to execute the strategy. Then you can tell the world." 3 days later, Penelope's article dropped like a bomb. Who really built Quinlan's billion-dollar platform? The architect they erased. The article tore through business media like wildfire. By lunch, it was trending. By evening, financial analysts were publishing emergency assessments. Quinlan's stock dropped 11% in 6 hours. Victor held an emergency press conference. I watched it from my apartment, whiskey in hand, as he stood behind a podium wearing his expensive suit and practiced sincerity. "These allegations are baseless," he said. "Cade Merritt was a valued employee, but Helix was a team effort." "Liar," I whispered at the screen. My phone buzzed. "Thaddeus, cease and desist letter incoming from Quinlan." "Ignore it. It's theater." Another text from Dex, half the team just walked out. They read the article. They know what he did. I poured another drink. The dominoes were falling exactly as planned. That night, 3 board members resigned. By morning, 2 major clients suspended their Helix contracts pending clarification of ownership issues. Victor's empire wasn't crumbling. It was disintegrating. And I was just getting started. The real weapon wasn't the article. It was what came next. I opened my laptop and sent an email to every company that had ever expressed interest in licensing Helix technology. The subject line, available for partnership. Terms negotiable. The responses flooded in. 16 companies in 48 hours. Tech giants who'd watched Quinlan dominate their market with Helix and wondered how they could compete. Now I was offering them the answer. Not a competitor to Helix, I was offering them Helix itself, rebuilt under my ownership, free from Quinlan's control. "You're creating a rival company?" Thaddeus asked during our strategy call. "I'm creating the original company. Quinlan was always just the vessel. Now I'm taking back what's mine and giving clients a choice, stick with Victor's sinking ship or come with the actual architect. They'll sue for breach of non-compete. Let them. The non-compete doesn't apply when they terminated me without cause. Section 22.4, I made sure of it." Thaddeus laughed. "You really did plan for everything." "I planned for betrayal. I just hoped I'd never need it." By the end of the week, I had signed preliminary agreements with 4 Fortune 500 companies. Each one represented millions in immediate revenue and long-term partnerships that would dwarf anything Quinlan could offer. Victor sent me an email, "We need to talk. Name your price." I replied with 2 words, "Too late." The board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but Dex recorded it. He'd become my inside source after walking out in protest, and because he was one of the few people who understood exactly what I'd built and what Victor had stolen. Victor stood at the head of the table, his confidence finally cracking. "We need to resolve this quickly," he said. "The stock is in freefall. Clients are leaving. Merritt has poisoned our reputation." "Merritt told the truth," one board member interrupted. "And we're paying the price for your ego." "This was a strategic termination, this was theft," another voice cut in. "We all read the contracts. He owns the foundation. You fired him anyway." The recording went silent for a moment. Then Victor's voice, tight with barely controlled rage, "Then we'll rebuild without him." "With what?" someone asked. "Helix is his code. His architecture. His vision. We can hire 1,000 engineers, and they'll spend 5 years catching up, if they ever do. Meanwhile, he's already moving with our biggest clients. The meeting dissolved into arguments about legal options, financial exposure, and worst-case scenarios. Dex texted me, "They're panicking." It's beautiful. I launched my company on a Tuesday. The name, Meridian Innovations. The tagline, "Building the future with the people who actually built it." Within hours, half of Quinlan's development team had sent me resumes. These weren't just employees. They were people I'd mentored, trained, and fought for during budget battles when Victor wanted to cut costs. They remembered. By the end of the week, I'd hired 12 of them. Dex became CTO. Lionel left Quinlan's legal department to become my general counsel. Ronan brought his entire marketing team. We rented office space in the same building where I'd first sketched Helix on a whiteboard 6 years ago. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Our first client meeting was with Paramount Dynamics, a manufacturing giant that had paid Quinlan millions for Helix integration. Their CEO, a sharp woman named Isolde Chen, sat across from me in our temporary conference room. "Tell me why we should abandon a working relationship with Quinlan for a startup that's 3 weeks old," she said. I smiled. "Because Quinlan doesn't actually own what you're paying for." "I do. And I'm offering you something Victor never could, direct access to the architect." Isolde studied me for a long moment. "You're risking everything on revenge." "I'm risking everything on integrity." "There's a difference." She leaned back. "Quinlan's lawyers will bury you. Let them try. I have contracts that predate Victor's ownership claims. I have testimony from engineers who watched him steal credit. And I have something Quinlan will never have, the trust of people who actually build things instead of just profiting from them." Isolde smiled. "Draft the agreement. We're in." That contract was worth $240 million over 3 years. 2 more clients followed within days. By the end of month 1, Meridian had secured $680 million in commitments. Quinlan's stock dropped another 23%. Business analysts started writing obituaries. The fall of Quinlan Industries, a case study in executive hubris. I didn't celebrate. I worked 16-hour days, rebuilding what Victor had tried to bury, proving that talent and integrity could defeat power and greed. My daughter asked me once during this period, "Dad, are you happy?" I thought about it. I'm not happy. But I'm free. And that's better. Victor tried one last move. He filed a lawsuit claiming I'd stolen trade secrets and violated my employment agreement. The media coverage was brutal, for him. Penelope published a follow-up article detailing every clause in my contract that protected my intellectual property rights. Former Quinlan employees went public with stories of Victor taking credit for their innovations. The narrative shifted from disgruntled employee to visionary architect reclaiming stolen work. The lawsuit collapsed in 6 weeks. Victor's attorneys withdrew after reviewing the evidence Thaddeus presented. The settlement was sealed, but rumors suggested Quinlan paid me an undisclosed sum to avoid discovery that would expose even more damaging information. I never confirmed or denied it. Some victories don't need press releases. By month 3, Meridian had 17 employees and 12 active clients. By month 6, we hit $1.1 billion in annual recurring revenue. The same platform Victor had fired me for creating was now making me wealthier than I'd ever been under his roof. But money wasn't the point. The point was proving that integrity outlasts corruption. That builders matter more than brand names. You can't erase someone who owns the foundation. Quinlan Industries declared bankruptcy 14 months after firing me. The announcement made front-page news. Victor resigned as CEO the same day, his reputation destroyed, his empire dissolved. I felt nothing watching it happen. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just the quiet certainty that consequences eventually find everyone. Former board members called me, asking if I'd consider acquiring Quinlan's assets. I declined. Some things deserve to die, I told Thaddeus. Instead, I focused on building Meridian into something better than Quinlan ever was. We implemented profit sharing for every employee. We created transparent promotion systems where credit went to actual contributors, not executives stealing glory. We made innovation matter more than hierarchy. 2 years after my firing, I stood on stage at the Global Tech Summit. The same conference where Victor once accepted an award for my platform while I watched from the audience. Now I was the keynote speaker. Power isn't about titles, I told the crowd. It's about integrity. They tried to steal my work. They tried to silence me. But you can't kill an idea whose time has come. And you can't erase someone who refuses to disappear. The applause lasted 90 seconds. Afterwards, a young engineer approached me. I'm about to sign with a company that wants me to surrender all IP rights, she said. Should I? I smiled. Only if you trust them completely. And build an exit strategy anyway. 3 years in, Meridian reached $2.3 billion in annual revenue. We'd expanded into artificial intelligence, machine learning applications, and predictive analytics, all built on the foundation I'd established with Helix but evolved far beyond what Quinlan ever imagined. Victor sent me an email one Tuesday morning. Subject: Congratulations. Body: You won. I hope it was worth it. I stared at those words for a long time. Was it worth it? The sleepless nights rebuilding from nothing? The legal battles drained my savings before the revenue came. The relationships were damaged because I chose integrity over comfort. Yes. 1,000 times, yes. Not because I destroyed Victor, though he'd earned his destruction. But because I'd proven something more important, that talent doesn't need permission from people who never understood it. That loyalty flows both ways, or it flows nowhere. The person who builds the foundation gets to decide whether the house stands or falls. I never responded to Victor's email. Some conversations don't deserve closure. Instead, I forwarded it to my daughter with a note: this is what happens when you bet on yourself. The industry changed after Quinlan fell. Other companies started reviewing their IP agreements. Engineers negotiated harder for ownership stakes. The old model of company owns everything you create began cracking under pressure from talent who'd watched my story and realized they had power too. I gave interviews about it, always emphasizing the same point: protect yourself legally before you need it. Trust people but verify everything. And never, ever work for someone who treats genius as disposable. Thaddeus started a practice specifically designed to help tech workers negotiate fair contracts. Penelope won a journalism award for her coverage of corporate exploitation. Dex became one of the most sought-after CTOs in Silicon Valley. Everyone who'd stood by me during the collapse built something better from the rubble. That's what real victory looks like. Not crushing your enemies, though sometimes that happens. Real victory is building something sustainable from the wreckage, creating systems where the next generation doesn't face the same betrayals. For years after my firing, I sold Meridian to a consortium of investors for $4.7 billion. I retained a controlling stake and remained as chairman but stepped back from day-to-day operations. I'd proven what I needed to prove. I used part of the money to start a foundation supporting engineers and developers who'd been exploited by employers. We funded legal battles for IP theft victims. We provided interest-free loans to help people leave toxic companies. We published resources about contract negotiation and ownership rights. The foundation was named after my daughter, the Kira Merritt Institute for Innovation Rights. She cried when I told her. "Dad, I just wanted you to be happy." I am happy. Finally. Because I'm using what happened to me to protect other people from the same fate. Victor reached out one more time. Not by email, he showed up at my office unannounced. Security called before letting him up. "It's fine," I said. "Let him come." He looked older. Grayer. The confidence that once filled rooms had evaporated, leaving behind something smaller and uncertain. I'm not here to apologize, he said, standing in my doorway. Good. I wouldn't believe it anyway. I'm here to understand. How did you plan for this? How did you know? I gestured to a chair. He sat. I didn't know, I said. I hoped I was wrong about you. But I prepared anyway because hope isn't a strategy. Victor stared at his hands. I thought I was protecting the company. You were protecting your ego. There's a difference. Maybe. He looked up. Do you regret any of it? The destruction? The jobs lost when Quinlan collapsed? I regret that you made it necessary. But no, I don't regret defending what I built. Your employees found new jobs. Better jobs. The ones with real talent landed at companies that valued them. The only person who truly lost was you. And you earned that loss. He nodded slowly. I suppose I did. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Victor stood. I won't bother you again. I just needed to see what winning looked like. From your side of the table. It looks like freedom, I said. And sleep without nightmares. That's what it looks like. He left. I never saw him again. 6 months later, I heard he'd moved to Portland and started teaching business ethics at a community college. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. 5 years after the firing, I stood in the same marble lobby where everything had ended. Quinlan Tower had been sold to a real estate developer and converted into luxury condominiums. The corporate logo was gone. The glass walls reflected a different city now, one where I'd rebuilt myself from ash and emerged stronger. My daughter met me there. She was 23 now, studying engineering at MIT. She'd watched my journey from destruction to resurrection and chosen to build things too. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Victor hadn't fired you? She asked. Every day. I probably would have stayed there until retirement, collecting a paycheck, letting him take credit for my work. Getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me, though I didn't know it at the time. That's depressing and inspiring at the same time. That's life. We walked out of the building together. The city stretched before us, full of people building empires on borrowed genius, workers wondering if loyalty would be rewarded or exploited, and a few who'd learned what I learned, that the only security comes from owning what you create. The documentary premiered 7 years after my termination. The Architect: How One Engineer Dismantled an Empire. It featured interviews with former Quinlan employees, board members, and industry analysts. Victor declined to participate. I sat through the premiere screening with mixed emotions. They'd gotten most of it right, the betrayal, the legal strategy, the careful dismantling of Victor's kingdom. But they'd missed something crucial. This wasn't a revenge story. It was a story about value. About knowing what you're worth and refusing to accept less. About understanding that companies are just structures, temporary vessels for human talent. The talent matters. The vessel doesn't. During the Q&A afterwards, someone asked, would you do it differently if you could go back? Yes, I said. I would have demanded ownership from day one. I would have left the moment I saw red flags instead of ignoring them. But I wouldn't change the outcome. Because the outcome taught me who I really am, and that's worth more than any salary Victor ever paid me. 10 years after the firing, I retired from active business. Meridian was thriving under new leadership. The foundation supported hundreds of engineers annually. My daughter had started her own company using principles I'd taught her about ownership and integrity. I bought a small house in the mountains. Nothing extravagant, just space to think and breathe without the weight of empire building pressing down on my shoulders. One morning, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a copy of my original termination letter from Quinlan, the one Victor had slid across his desk a decade ago. Someone had framed it. Attached was a note in handwriting I didn't recognize, from the engineers you inspired. You turned the worst day into the beginning of something better. Thank you for showing us that genius doesn't need permission. I hung it in my study. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. That power belongs to people who create value, not people who simply claim it. That integrity outlasts corruption. That you can lose everything and still win if you refuse to surrender what matters. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what I did wasn't revenge. Revenge is emotional, temporary, hollow. What I did was justice, structural, permanent, meaningful. I didn't destroy Victor because I hated him. I dismantled his empire because it was built on theft and needed to fall so something better could rise. The difference matters. Revenge leaves you empty. Justice leaves you free. And freedom, the knowledge that you own your work, your reputation, your future, is the only currency that appreciates forever. Today, when young engineers ask me for advice, I tell them 3 things. First, protect yourself legally before you need it. Assume betrayal is possible and prepare accordingly. Second, know what you're worth. Not what someone pays you, what you create. The gap between those numbers is where exploitation lives. Third, be willing to walk away. From money, from comfort, from security. Because nothing you own matters if you don't own yourself. And if you're not willing to lose everything, you'll never truly have anything. I think about Victor sometimes. Not with anger anymore, just curiosity. What does he tell himself about what happened? Does he blame me? Does he accept responsibility? Does he understand that he didn't lose to me, he lost to consequences? The answers don't matter. Victor's story ended when mine began. He's a footnote now. A cautionary tale. A reminder that corporate power without integrity is just temporary authority waiting to collapse. My story continues. Not in boardrooms anymore. Not in legal battles or press releases. But in the engineers I mentor who demand fair contracts. In the companies that restructure ownership models to protect creators. In the slow, steady shift of an industry that's finally recognizing talent as the foundation everything else rests on. That's the real victory. Not what I took from Victor, what I built from nothing after he took everything from me. Legacy isn't measured in revenue or market cap. It's measured in change. In systems improved. In people empowered. In the next generation avoiding your mistakes because you documented them clearly enough that they became lessons instead of secrets. Last month, I received an invitation to speak at Quinlan Business School. The irony made me laugh. They'd named it after Victor before his empire collapsed, and the name stuck despite the scandal. Some monuments outlast the people they honor. I accepted. The auditorium was packed with graduate students studying business ethics. I stood at the podium where Victor once gave leadership lectures and wondered if he'd ever told the truth from this spot. You've been told to think of business as strategy, I began. Markets to conquer. Competitors to crush. Resources to exploit. But business is simpler than that. It's relationships built on value exchange. You create something worth having. Someone pays for it. Trust flows both ways or it flows nowhere. I told them my story. Not as a hero's journey, as a warning. About what happens when trust breaks. About the price of treating people as disposable. About the power of knowing your worth and protecting it legally. The question isn't whether you'll face betrayal, I said. It's whether you'll survive it. And survival requires preparation. Own your work. Document your contributions. Build escape routes before you need them. Because loyalty is beautiful, but loyalty without protection is just vulnerability waiting to be exploited. The applause lasted a long time. Afterward, a student approached me. Mr. Merritt, do you forgive him? Victor Quinlan? I thought about it. Really thought. Forgiveness requires remorse. Victor regrets the consequences, not the actions. So, no, I don't forgive him. But I don't think about him anymore either. Forgiveness and indifference look similar from a distance, but one sets you free and one keeps you chained. I chose freedom. I walked out of that auditorium into sunlight that felt different than it had 10 years ago. Warmer. Clearer. The sunlight of someone who'd lost everything and built something better from the ruins. That evening, I called my daughter. Kira, remember when you asked if I was happy? Yeah, Dad. You said you were free instead. I was wrong. I'm both now. Finally. Both. Because happiness isn't about never falling. It's about learning that falling doesn't define you, how you rise does. And I rose with integrity intact, lessons learned, and a future built on foundations no one could steal because I owned every single brick. Power doesn't announce itself with volume or titles. It shows itself in choices made calmly, in moments that matter, when everything's at stake, and you choose your values over your fear. That's the lesson I carry forward. Not revenge. Not victory. Just the quiet certainty that I'm exactly who I need to be, and that's worth more than any empire built on stolen genius. The story ends where it began. With me. Whole. Free. And finally, completely mine.